Terve! Welcome to another episode of Finding Finland with your host, Rudy Owens, the podcast where we talk about all things Finland. Welcome to another episode of the podcast Finding Finland with your host, Rudy Owens. And I am joined today by Laura Aho. And Laura, I see the title for you. I hope it's correct for translation. You're spokesperson for the Genealogical Society of Finland?
Yes, that is correct. So we use publicist, but that is the same difference. Yeah, really. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And I just thought I would just briefly introduce a little background. We met basically online last year, and through our relationship and our communications, you helped me get my story published. We'll get into that later. So it's just really wonderful to finally meet you in person here. And just to have this conversation. And I just thought you could just introduce us, get us going by telling us a little bit about the Genealogical Society of Finland. And I'm hoping you can first pronounce its name in Finnish for our audience, and then just give us a little bit of a story about, yourself and then how you ended up working for this organization, which promotes the study of genealogy in Finland.
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me to take part in your fun podcast and so on. And thanks for sharing your story on Jalmari and so on. Yes, it's Genealogical Society of Finland, which is Suomen sukututkimusseura in Finnish. It's a very long word, but if you Google the Genealogical Society of Finland, you will end up in our English language page and so on.
It's great.
Yeah, and my story, I am not actually a genealogist. I studied and still study classical languages at the University of Helsinki. I'm doing my PhD on it.
Okay.
But I ended up working at the society. It would be something like 2007 or 2008 when I was still an undergrad.
Yeah.
And they needed someone to keep the library open in the evenings. So they chose me. And after that, I've worked for them, not continuously since then. I've had few breaks where I did different things, but now I've been the publicist for about 7 years.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. And thank you for that introduction to this organization. So I just want to share with folks who aren't familiar with you. I thought the mission statement was a really nice one. And I think mission statements are important. And it says the Genealogical Society of Finland is an education and memory institution that, as a scientific society, promotes Finnish family and personal history research and publishes results. And then you also say that you're a national organization for genealogy experts and cooperation, as well as an educational and memory foundation. So I think, I was looking up some of these terms. So can you sort of briefly explain the technical term, but then also for genealogy, and then also what it means to be a memory organization or a memory foundation?
Well, yeah. We do different things. We are first of all, we are a scientific organization, which means we publish a scientific journal, which is like a scientific journal. I don't know how to explain it any other way.
It's peer-reviewed research, and it's available to the researchers.
It's research. Then we obviously have members and associates who are actual scientific researchers. They have a background usually in Finnish history or something like that. But then obviously we are also an organization for the thousands of people in Finland who do genealogical research. They aren't necessarily from universities and they do it as a hobby or a passion or out of interest for their own families,
right,
and so on. And that's where the educational side comes along, because we try to obviously, especially people who necessarily don't have a background in historical studies and so on, or haven't studied history in university and so on. So we try to educate them about the sources and what are reliable sources, what are not reliable sources, and also how you have to, obviously all sources, you have to be critical with them and so on.
Right.
And
Right.
also, yeah, where can you find information and about Finnish history and how that affects the sources and so on and on.
Okay.
And then the third thing we do is we offer different kind of databases, basically. So that's where the memory organization comes along. So we make the sources more easily available for people.
Okay. All right. So now I actually was looking up on some US sites. They may be different than how you do it there. So like a genealogist, I was reading something that a genealogist may do is a family history that goes back 4 to 5 generation. They're looking for things like maiden names or mother's names that go back multiple generations. They're finding documents like the death notice of somebody or the birth notice of somebody. And then in the realm of what would be considered like a family history or a family story, it could be something different where you're trying to determine like how a photo fits into a narrative about a family event, like a reunion, or you're talking about like a community and relationships with the family in historic events or circumstances. So are these things fluid, or is genealogy really that scientific specific oriented thing? Is it fluid, or is it more really task oriented with these A, B, and C, and this is what we do, or is it expansive?
It's definitely fluid. It depends on who is doing it. Different people find different things interesting. Some people want to get those stories from their background, the stories. Sometimes those, especially for many people, if you are just looking for stories, that can go back many generations for obvious reasons, because stories, unfortunately, aren't usually, unless you find someone's diary or something like that.
Right.
Then there are people who are very into what I would call mostly collecting names. They want to know the names of everyone they are as far as they can go, and they have tens of thousands of people that they are related to.
Yeah.
And then some people are interested in the more bigger picture, where the DNA part sort of comes along with genetic background. Maybe there's a bit of Russian, bit of Swedish, bit of German, and so on. So there's definitely different ways of doing genealogy.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and I was just looking up this morning, in the United States, genealogy is considered our second most popular hobby. In Finland,
wow,
does it rank at this level in terms of widespread appeal to the average Finnish person?
I don't know. I haven't seen any ranking, but it is quite popular in Finland, I would say. A lot, I would say, it's more popular in Northern Europe more than in maybe the Southern Europe.
Okay.
And part of that reason is obviously the fact that after the Reformation, I don't know how much you know about the
I'm familiar.
when Protestants became to be, and people left Catholic
I was
Church.
named after Martin Luther originally.
Yeah, after
familiar
Martin
with him.
Luther. So a bit after that, in the 1600s, 1700s, the church records are quite good in Finland compared to other countries.
Okay.
So it is possible to do genealogical research in Finland. It's a lot easier than it is in some other countries.
Okay.
Because the records are so good. So that's why probably it's quite popular also. But I don't know what the ranking would be, and how you would even rank something like a hobby. What is considered a hobby, really, first of all.
Okay. Well, I
But
just know
popular,
it's beloved in this country, and we have all kinds of popular cultural growth activities coming from it. We have a very I think it's is it Henry Louis Gates Jr., a historian, an African American historian at Harvard, and he's doing these TV shows about it, and he's using DNA, and it's
Yes.
become extremely like it has its own cult following, and it's really it takes off. And then also in our country, I think we had what we would say the democratization of genealogy really occurred with the publication, and I think it was 1976 by Alex Haley, the African American author. He published a book called Roots, the Saga of an American Family, which instead of looking at white ancestry, he went to the African American story, which if you know our history, people didn't know their ancestors because their names were changed, their families were erased, they were property. And so that exploded, I think, the concept that genealogy isn't the domain of someone, it's the domain of everybody. And so he really sort of blew the lid off it. And then there was this widespread, everyone started doing it. And this was before DNA. So that's how it sort of evolved in our popular consciousness here, I think.
Very similar to Finland. I think genealogy started to become popular around maybe 1970s also or so on, when people got interested in the roots of just ordinary people.
Right.
100 years ago, 150 years ago, so on. Genealogy was more considered something that people who had, let's say, noble backgrounds or rich backgrounds, so they would have to have like kings and noblemen and so on. They were interested in genealogy, but in the 70s, normal people got interested in genealogy, and I think it's gotten more and more popular. And we also have those TV shows. I think they are almost in every country now. It's the same format, and that's also contributing to the popularity. And then also the DNA testing.
Yeah.
Because that appeals to, maybe the DNA part is something that maybe appeals to the younger generation maybe a bit more, or and it gives the genealogy sort of like cool technological cutting edge kind of vibe that maybe just going through old archives doesn't give. It makes genealogy cool.
Well, it also, I hate to say, it eliminates the labor. It tries to create a shortcut to get you somewhere without having invested the time and resources to learn. And I think that is how we have been conditioned in our thinking and in our acting from technology. We want the labor eliminated. We want results fast without paying our dues. And I think that has some upsides and some downsides. That's sort of what I'm thinking. And then in our country, we're unique in this United States. We have the Mormon Church, and the Mormon Church's theology is premised on knowing ancestry. And so it was, to be honest, it was folks who have what's called the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Christian Saints. LDS is short. I think that's how they even say it. The LDS, it was people who were involved in the LDS that created these technological platforms like Family Search and others, and then commercialized it and then popularized it so everyone could start building their tree online as well. And has that happening? Are people using Family Search in Finland?
Oh yes. And the LDS has done a lot of good work in Finland too. They've digitized, and they digitize Finnish church and parish records to this day. So they've done a lot, and they are important part of genealogy because it is so important to them, obviously. If I go back a bit to the DNA part, that I would say the best results, if you're doing genealogy, you look at when you combine the DNA genealogy and the traditional genealogy, really. But yeah, obviously DNA is, you you get like immediate some sort of results at
Correct.
least.
Correct.
But obviously DNA is something that I think Americans find obviously much more interesting, because many people don't know whether there's Irish ancestry, there's Italian ancestry,
Correct.
and German ancestry, and so on and so on. Whereas in Finland, many people are, I don't know if they're disappointed or not, but it's not that exciting, because it is totally common to get like result that you are 100% Finnish. So
Okay.
there's no, that doesn't really help you a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Not that exciting.
yeah, yeah, and then we can talk later about the surprises where the dark secrets of families are
Mm,
revealed, and that has its own set of moral discussions, and it creates sort of this conundrum, because people have the family secrets, and then you can also, there is probably incidents of sexual crimes that have happened to women, and so I read a large story the other day in The Guardian about a man discovered his grandfather was a Nazi and was a
yeah.
prisoner of war in Germany. And so DNA reveals the things we aren't really wanting to discuss. But my sense is people who go on a genealogy search want to know the good and the bad. So
Mm.
I think my sense is people do it, they want to embrace it, and they don't know all the stories, but they're willing to take a chance. So that's what I think.
Well, hopefully, I would say that if someone is considering ordering a test and doing a test, you should first think about what if there's something surprising, something negative that comes out. How are you going to react? Because that is always, there's that possibility
Yeah.
that it isn't what you're expecting, and
Yeah.
it might open a can of worms, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the most extreme cases, it could. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the unknown.
yeah.
But I was thinking about this. I wrote down in my notes, I was just going to ask you, so like obviously you're dealing with people, your organization deals with people who want to know their past because the past tells them about who they are. So I wrote a book about my family history because I'm an adoptee, and I quoted the Oracle of Delphi, which says "Know thyself." And so the
Yeah.
question is like, is that the first order of business for who we are, knowing who we are? Is that our question? Does genealogy help us answer this human question?
Well, yeah, I think that's something that people are interested in. That's something they are looking for. They are looking for answers. Why am I the way I am? Why are my parents the way they are? Maybe there
Mm.
is some generational trauma, and
Yep.
maybe I will now understand why my grandmother never smiled, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
It's something like that. And then and I but I also think it's sort of genetic, where I'm genetically from. Is there, obviously, then there's the very practical side of if there's some diseases in my family,
Yes. Yep.
something like that. And I feel like many people, the first time most people get interested in genealogy is after they have kids. So young people aren't usually, there are some, I know, very young people who are
Yeah.
interested in genealogy, but generally, that's the first time people start to think about it. Now that I'm a parent, I
Yeah.
would like to know more about my background, and I want to know what I'm passing on to my
Correct.
children.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would second that. And I hear that from people as well who are beginning to think about these questions more as they have these responsibilities,
Yeah.
and their next generation is going to be living beyond them. So thank you for having that little discussion. So I just wanted to touch base. So just because we're talking about your society, if there's stuff you
Yes.
just want to share a little bit about, kind of like I saw you were created in 1917. So can you just maybe also just give us a quick summary, like how many people are working there, and how do you fund this organization, which serves everybody?
Well, yeah, we aim to serve everybody, and the Genealogical Society was founded in 1917, the same year as the Finnish state was born. We are
That's right.
actually a bit older than the Finnish state.
Okay.
And obviously, like, as first it was like, let's say there's like very serious researchers, mostly concentrating on the upper classes and so on. And then little by little it became more of a, like, genealogy as a hobby became more and more popular, and more people got into it. There's well, it differs a bit, but there's usually about 3 or 4 people who work for the society. Then we have loads of volunteers, and trainees and so on. Obviously, they aren't like huge. We aren't able to pay huge amounts of people, which would be lovely to have, the amount of money that we could pay all our volunteers to do their work and so on. But like in humanities, often that's the money really is in there. We are mostly funded by our members. We have, I'm not sure what the figure is at the moment, but it's something between 8,000 and 8,500, maybe 8,200 or something like that. That's how many members we have.
Okay.
And obviously they pay an annual membership fee, but our services, we have many services that are not just for members, they are for everyone to use. And I have no idea how many, probably tens of thousands of people use them. And so
I used your resources that
yes,
it was nice for me to just know that they were there. It didn't answer all of my questions, but it's your website is listed when I check, like, for instance, Finnish-American, there's some Finnish-American groups here who support those who want to know their past, and they always get you to your site really fast. So it's nice to know. And people are here who are practicing genealogy are always referring folks to your website. So I'll be sure to put your website link in when I do the podcast so we know how people get it. And for people who need to know, if they don't visit Finnish website, Finland almost automatically gets all this stuff is translated into English. So it's very mostly accessible for Americans who don't have multiple language skills. So I love your website.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned you do a publication, I think it's called Genos, and that comes out 4 times a year?
4 times a year, and that's our scientific journal.
Yes. You also are are you the publisher of Jalmari, which is a digital magazine? So just briefly share with us what that is. And for folks who need to know my story, I reached out to you about my story, and my story briefly was I'm an adoptee, so I didn't know I was a Finnish American until I was 24 and I found my kin. Then I learned that my mother, her mother, so that's my maternal grandmother, was 100% Finnish. So and I knew I had this family tree, and I'm looking at it now, and we go back to 1770, the marriage of Michael Torn and Magdalena Anders, and I think that was in South Ostrobothnia. So then I found the surviving family members, and I visited, and I wrote this big story that on my website, and then I contacted you, and then you offered to publish it in your wonderful magazine. So thank you. And that was in English.
Thank you.
But tell us about what goes in your magazine, and then who's reading it.
Well, Jalmari is for mostly our members. So those 8,500 or so on.
Yeah.
And it's not a scientific journal like Genesis, but it's a bit more maybe approachable or something like that. I publish all sorts of things in it. There are news and current affairs in genealogy and so on, and then different little stories, people's backgrounds, so different stories from history, and so on.
Okay.
And I think people enjoy it. I hope they do.
Okay. So now we'll just talk about my story. So that was
Yes.
unusual. So I guess my question is, why were you so generous to me? I mean, I appreciate it, but like, what was like, and then was there any sort of like feedback, negative or positive about something in English, mainly for your Finnish audience?
Yeah, well, it was unusual in a way that it was the first, maybe not the last, but the first English language article in it. I didn't get, I was kind of surprised. In Swedish, we get the, could you translate this? I would like to read this, but I can't read Swedish. But no, I didn't get any negative feedback, and I think it went down very well. It was very interesting. We have American members, so hopefully
Oh,
for
okay.
once there was something for them to read and understand. And it's gives a bit of a different perspective of someone who isn't Finnish. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for that. That was fantastic.
Well, yeah, and one thing I noticed as well, like I know your Facebook page is very active, which is great. I read a lot of your content, and of course, because of AI, all the stuff is
Yeah.
translated, so I know what's going on, which is nice for me. I think I reached out to you. I believe it was you who I posted that my story was published, my story that
Yeah.
I did on my website, which was twice as long. I had no reaction in the US. I had no genealogical groups interested. And then I published it. You allowed it to be shared on your page. I think it required a permission. And there were so many people liking it.
Yeah.
And so that just always just surprised me. It's like
Yeah.
the Finnish people were very interested in that someone from America wanted to know their family story in Finland. I thought that was really unique, but in America, they weren't impressed.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is because there are so very few Finns compared to there's only 5.5 million of us.
Yeah.
So whenever someone outside of Finland is interested in Finland, we are immediately interested how they perceive Finland or
Yeah.
Finns or so on. So everybody was really interested. I remember you got a lot of likes and
I
comments
know.
and everything, and obviously, well, many Finns can at least read English in so yeah. So I think many people read it. Yeah.
I was like, I noticed on my website, I just had the most number of visits I've ever had for that story. So it was clearly
Fantastic.
it was the right place to reach the right
Yeah.
audience. So most of the time unless you understand how to do cat videos, we mostly miss on social media. And so that was nice for me just because, well, because it was a nice story for me, and it was a really, for me, it's just interesting to know my family story now. And I like one thing I know there's some health issues that are in my family which are important, and I've realized that some health issues on the Finnish side are the same as the ones on the U.S. side, and
Oh, okay.
and there are genetic markers and
Yeah.
genetic issues which the Finnish health professionals have understood for a long time. So they just acknowledge it. And so now I have a little better understanding of my health issues. And I had a family member who passed away from a health issue, which is a common problem in Finland. So
Yeah.
it's for me, it's important to know those family connections, because then you can maybe plan better, eat better,
Mhm. Mhm.
exercise more,
Mhm.
do what you can do, and
Mhm.
hope for the
Mhm.
best, I guess.
Yeah.
So, um, let's see. So, just also wanted to talk about other things on your website. So I know So for folks who haven't been to your website, I'll just kind of highlight for them what they can find there. There's a forum,
Yes,
and you call it Suku Forum, and that's a discussion group where you can ask questions and share findings. There's something called Hiski, which is your
yes.
historical book database, and that's
That
for,
is the most important one. That's where
oh,
you want
okay.
to start. Hiski is where you want to start.
And
Yes.
so that has parish history books, right? So that's where
Yes,
you want
that,
to find the real important, like the name
yes,
of that ancestor you're looking for could be
exactly.
birth,
That's
right?
where you're gonna find the birth record or death record or the marriage record or so on of your ancestors.
And I must
That's
say
the
it's
most important
powerful
thing.
to see those things in a
Yeah.
document, right? Like
Yes.
even in the US, I found documents that were only like 100 years old, and they were US Census documents, but they were
Yes.
documents with my great grandfather and great grandmother and their children.
Yeah.
And I could see that. And it was on this page, and it was for the city of Hancock, Michigan, where many Finnish-Americans moved to
Yes.
when they emigrated. And then you could also see the language at home was primarily Finnish for most of the people on this page. But there they were listed in the record, and it was emotional for me, I think, to see that.
Yeah, it is interesting. Sort of like proof that they existed,
Yes,
although you sort of know they did. Obviously, you wouldn't be here if they didn't, but it is still somewhat emotional, sort
it
of
is.
like they existed for other people, they existed in the records, they
Yeah.
really existed.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's very cool. And so the other resources I'm just going to mention is something called Sukuhaku, and that's a
Yes,
membership service.
yeah, that's for
And
members only. Yes,
and can you just share briefly a little bit of information about that for people?
yes, that's for members only, except for the Gravestone database, which is also works in Sukuhaku. But in Sukuhaku, you have loads of different stuff. There's digitized books,
Mhm.
digitized, like digitized, ready-made, or someone else has made a genealogical research, published it. It's digitized. The book is digitized in Sukuhaku, or some of them are. Then there's different types of um, uh, indexes there, so you can find they aren't the actual sources in there,
Mhm.
but you can see if like a name pops up
Okay.
in some source, so it will tell you that this source has this person in it, and then you can
Okay.
actually find the source and find the page where that person is to be found,
All right.
and so on. So there's loads and loads of stuff on Sukuhaku. Yes.
All right. And then, of course, you said you have a Gravestone database, and I
Yes.
see it's over 700,000.
Yeah.
So is that includes just names, right? Not photographs, that's names. Is that correct?
It includes photographs
Oh, okay.
of the gravestone also. So,
Okay.
and that is growing every month. So there's who's buried there obviously. Well, it depends what's on the stone, but usually obviously there's the birth date and the death date.
Okay.
And so that on, and then there's a picture of the grave. And
I
obviously
I
there's
I've got I've
also,
got I have
yeah,
those of my grandparents. So it's
yeah,
important. I did that. I found Find a Grave is the source I used in the
yes,
USA.
yes.
So
Yeah, so you can find a grave, or you can check birth dates, death dates, families, if there's family tombs and so on. So you can check those, and yeah, it's very interesting. And obviously, I don't know how it works in the US, but in Finland, you buy like a plot
uh-huh.
for a certain amount of time, and then if you don't keep, or the family doesn't keep paying it, then it goes. So there are gravestones there that don't actually exist anymore, so they are
Gotcha.
only there. So this is also part of the memory organization,
Okay.
part of our function.
We had just finished talking about the large database you have on the
Yes.
gravestones, and you also have what's called a census list search. So I know census data is like a gold mine in the United States for researchers. Is this like all census data that is shared by the government of Finland?
Yeah, no, this is this is a new database for us, and it is still there isn't a lot of information on it yet. We have an army of volunteers doing the
Okay, that's cool.
doing the work at the moment, and it's obviously growing all the time. So there's more and more information on censuses in Finnish genealogy aren't quite as important as they are in the US. They are more due to they were gathered for tax purposes, and I don't think now I might get caught that I am not a genealogist. I don't think they go quite as far back as the church records and
Okay,
so on.
yeah.
But there are some areas in Finland where, unfortunately, the church records have burned. Well, they've burned down or they've been destroyed. So obviously, in those areas, the census records are very, very important because they are the only source.
Okay, gotcha. Understood.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
And that is also anybody can go on that database. So that's not only for members. So anybody can try out, especially if you have family from Lapland, then try out, because that's where the most of the material is now from. Yeah.
Okay. All right, that sounds cool. All right, so again, we just went over a number of these resources which anyone around the world can access by checking it, and so that's just a really cool thing, particularly in my country. Now, I thought I would share, like, so like just for people who don't know Finnish-American like history, the brief history, and I just got a 400-page book I'm reading now on Finnish immigration to my birth state alone. That was Michigan. Yeah. So people have done a lot of research on this. So just from that book and some public databases, from what I understand, about 345,000 Finnish folks who were then from what was, I guess, the Grand Duchy of Finland, the Russian-controlled Finnish area before it was a country. Until it became a country, 345,000 people emigrated. I understood that the large percentage of them, and I don't know, I would need to verify this, but a large chunk of them came from South Ostrobothnia, and that's your farming area, sort of in the south central part of the country, and that's where my ancestors are from. And then one source I read that was in this book, it said that about 90%, in fact, of all the immigrants to the USA were South Ostrobothnian for between 1867 and 1892. So that would have been right after the famine. So you had the famine, which decimated the population, and then you had changes in agriculture, and I guess it was issues of people not being able to access land, or there was limitation to land resources, and that fueled a lot of the people leaving the country coming to America. So most of them came, as you may or may not know, to Minnesota and Michigan. So that's the two states in the upper Midwest, and they had lots of resource industries. They had mining, and they had forestry and timber harvesting. So Finns were doing hard labor work, like my great grandfather. So, and they also went to Ontario, the same thing in Ontario, just across Lake Superior. So there's a lot of Finnish Americans who have these, and they celebrate Finnish cultural heritage. So do you hear from these people, and how is it that you interact with those people, like saying, I'm just starting my search, what can I do?
Well, obviously you can always email us and so on, and we'll try to help you any way we can, and obviously also check our website. There's even a page called Starting Genealogical Research, and that check that out first, and so on. We've had I think there's been a bit of an ebb and flow in the relationship with the Michigan and Minnesota genealogist. We used to have, I think, at some point before my time here,
Uh-huh.
there was more cooperation and so on, but we get they send us their papers or journals or whatever they publish,
Mhm.
and we try to send them theirs, and I think there's is it in somewhere in Michigan that there was like a Finnish university or something
Yeah,
like that.
it's now closed.
But
It
it's
used to be
closed.
called
Yeah.
Finlandia
Unfortunately, it's
University.
closed. So
But there's the Finlandia Foundation. There's
yes,
a facility there
yes,
which preserves Finnish cultural heritage and does events. And they just had
yeah,
February Sauna Week, International
yeah,
Sauna Week celebration. So they're trying to keep those relationships and ties. And
yes,
they publish a website that lists resources, and yours was on there. I think I found it, your
yeah,
website there on their website. Yep.
yeah. We try to publish their resources on our site. We also have I think it's just called immigration, the page in English, and
Uh-huh.
there's a different parts of the world, but obviously the one to the US is there's a long list of resources and sites and so on that you can look at.
Okay. So now I did go to your website and I liked it. You did this, you had something 10 easy tips for newcomers, right?
Yes.
So and I'll just read something that was shared on your website. It said, um, you have there's lots of resources out there for the average person. It's advisable that the beginner genealogist takes a basic course on genealogy
Yes.
where you are taught in the most important sources and research principles in genealogy. So uh, do people do that, or do you have to sort of sometimes push back when people say help me, but they haven't done the legwork? Do you have to say you need to understand how to do it first, and then we can be of better service? Does that happen?
Yeah, it does happen. We always try to help, but it's easier to help when the person has the basics
Right.
and understands what sources are out there,
Yep.
and understands, for example, in Finland you can't publish publicly any information that is younger than 100 years old.
Okay.
So you have to try to get the information that is 100 years or younger by interviewing your grandparents or
Okay.
so
Oh,
on.
that's important to know.
Yes, or you can order some information straight from the parishes, but you can't get it online.
Okay.
And that's one of the first things to do. I don't know how it is in the US, but in Finland there are a lot of adult education centers and so on that offer basic courses in genealogy. We do
Okay.
it every now and then, not every year. We actually did it only last year. We actually had how to start or how to research your roots in Finland course in English. So that's
Okay.
something we'll see if we do that again at some point. So
All
that's
right.
something.
So,
And they are
so
usually, the courses aren't that expensive and so on. So that's a very good, because in the end you may pay a little to go to the course, but in the end it will save you a lot of time and a lot
time.
of mistakes.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think in the USA, it would probably be for most folks, it would be either through a genealogy group. And
Yeah.
in our case, in our country, we have lots of community college that offer
Yeah,
these sort of
I would imagine
adult
so. Yes.
education classes. And this is
Yes.
probably one that most people could find either online or in person.
Yep.
Then do the research, and then once you know the basics, then come back and then see if you
Yeah.
can do it. Do you have people actually coming in and visit you in person? Is that advisable or not? Who are, let's say,
Yeah,
planning a family trip or they're planning a holiday, like, well, because I'm here, let's go check it out.
yeah, you can visit us. It's in the center of Helsinki. It's actually not very far from the Senate Square, which is
No, I
the
know it's a great neighborhood.
yeah. So yeah, but check first because we're open 3 days a week.
Okay.
Or we work, but the library is open. That's where our office and library is. So
Okay.
3 times a week. but unfortunately, the month of July we are usually closed.
Vacation.
So that's very unfortunate, because that's obviously when many people from outside of Finland would like to visit
Yes.
Finland and would like to come, but that's when we're on our summer holiday,
Your
unfortunately.
cottages, your summer.
Yeah.
Nice. Yes. That's what I know as well. It's like when I contacted people who helped me last year, they said, well, I was June. They said, I'll get back to you in July, late July.
Yeah.
That's how it worked. And then it worked out just fine. So
Yeah.
I timed my trip such that everyone was done with their holidays, so they would be back when I came. And that worked out perfectly for me. And I had
Yeah.
nice weather. So that was really good. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, really for the American genealogist, like do your homework, learn how to do it, and then begin to, you know, if there's more advanced things, research tips or things that you need to do more advanced research, that's a better way to go about this. So
Yes.
tips for the
Yes.
American genealogists out
Yes.
there.
And join the Facebook groups.
Okay,
There's
yes,
loads of different Facebook groups.
yes.
Obviously, our group and few others.
There's the
Big
Gravestone,
Finnish
there's the
genealogy
Gravestone.
groups, and
Yep,
like I said, most Finns understand English and can answer in English, and many are very keen on helping and sharing the information. So just join and ask around.
right. Okay, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
And let's see. I guess the final thing is, you know, I noticed your website and others, they're beginning. We talked a little bit about DNA
Yes.
and how that's sort of changing thing. Is there sort of a professional position? I'm just curious about this, just because DNA is such a hot. I mean, for adoptees, like the issue for an adopted person who had like there's far more adoptees in the USA than in Finland. We have millions of people who are adopted. We're legally prevented from knowing their ancestry by law. We're denied it by popular culture and government. So we have this massive barrier. So we're almost forced to take DNA tests because things that most people have by legal right, where we have laws saying you can't access it. So many of us do DNA because we have no choice. So we have to just accept the fact that a large corporation now owns our personal information, and that has its own moral questions about it. Should a private company own biological information of an individual for profit? But at the same time, DNA is so powerful and it's able to connect people that never would have connected. So is there one thing I just thought we could maybe just close on is, has your organization taken a professional position on DNA testing, or is it just sort of a set of guidelines? We recommend this or we don't. How are groups like yours like helping people confront the new reality?
Well, we try to advise people. There's quite a bit of, or there's a page again on our website about what to take in consideration if you want to do a DNA test. But obviously, we are a non-profit organization, so we can't say one way or another use this company and don't use this company.
Right.
And so on. There are a few companies that are actually mentioned on our website that Finns more often use. So if you think you have Finnish ancestry, then it would be recommendable to use those companies, obviously, rather than the others. But we just give out guidelines and obviously tell people to be, like always, careful with their information and their DNA profiles and so on. And also be careful when approaching people, or be discreet when maybe approaching, especially if you're adopted, approaching a new person you are related to and so on. But nothing more really, no.
Okay. Yeah, so I think you know, I think it's going to continue. It's a part of in our country, it remains an active part of the discussion when we talk about the right to know who we are. And I think one thing we say in the United States, and I'm bringing in my adoptee perspective, is that laws that say that secrets should be hidden forever are it's technology has made that a ridiculous condition because science is raced far ahead of popular notions of secrecy. And so it's like, how can you have a law where no one can be secret anymore? None of us is secret.
Yeah.
We're all
Very,
public
very
now.
true. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but we've always been sort of public, you know, many of us have already been public. I mean, like I found my ancestors without really their their permission, but I used an intermediary, so that probably helped me.
Yeah.
So it was really through like someone who knew someone, and she had a relationship to the community of Corica, and because of those
Yes.
relationships and her personal relationships, that opened the door, and it was actually through a Facebook message. So even then, when it's not harmful, it creates a lot of uncertainty for people. They think it's a
Yes.
scam, they think it's a hoax, they get nervous, what's really going on here, right? So
Yeah, they do.
yeah, so any tips for that? Like what just curious, like let's say you learn you have some relatives somewhere. What are tips that Finnish genealogists recommend for those first conversations for people who discover relationships? Have you talked about that ever?
No, no, we really haven't thought about it because it depends so much on the different people react so differently. Some people they are very, they think it's a scam or it's
Yep.
something, and
It
obviously
probably
also
is.
there's the possibility that even if the DNA doesn't really open a can of worms for you, it might open a can of worms for some other family.
Correct.
So they might
Right.
want to know there might be some like cheating or whatever
Yes.
in the background. If you all of a sudden find a half sibling you haven't known and you don't know anything about, then there might be something that people don't want to find out. They don't want to think about. They don't want to hurt other people
Right.
with the knowledge and so on. So always be very careful with
I think the next wave of people who are really feeling this most intensely are those who are conceived through you know fertility medicine, donor conception. You know, you have
yeah.
these cases that have arisen around the world. Like in, you know, I read that one clinic in Australia was responsible for 60,000 conceptions, and there was
Yes.
like people who have been reported that have 600 siblings,
Yes.
possibly. And so for those people, it's just there's a lot of foreboding, I think, for it. They're going to be
Yeah.
confronting it, but
Yeah.
they're going to learn. They're going to eventually learn if they do those tests. So
Yeah, they are. Well, you're gonna first of all find not that all parents even they'll tell their children that they are a result of a
correct.
fertility treatments, but then yeah, I think there's been in several countries there's been these scandals where
Yeah,
there are hundreds of people who have siblings.
correct.
That's obviously not a good
But
thing.
yeah, you know, and my thinking, because I'm such a thinking about, but all those people, in my view, have a human right to know who they are and
Yes.
where they came from, right? That I said this with someone when I came back, like we all have a village somewhere where our ancestors once came from. You know,
Yes.
I mean, we all came from like Africa, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we literally just marched out of the African continent and filled the world. And you know, and it's actually interestingly enough, I saw a great show, a DNA discussion of DNA analysis, and it talked about they were able to trace the ancestry of the forest Finns. So those are the Finnish tenant farmers who would do slash and burn agriculture. They
Yeah.
would burn the forest and then they would move after a couple of years of rye, and they did DNA testing and they were able to confirm their, like many of the forest Finns moved to Norway and Sweden, and it's
Yes.
because of DNA that
Yeah.
they've confirmed that they have Finnish origins, right? So it's
Yes.
helped connect these immigrants just close by to your country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So it was a great discussion, and I find it fascinating how you have now you have like traditional sources of
Yes.
information, and then you have DNA working together to sort of tell these stories. So partnerships, I guess, in the future of research.
Yeah, there is, and it's but it's also interesting. It also brings out the old old question: what is genetic and what is learned? Especially maybe in cases where people haven't been growing up in their like genetic family. So what is learned and what is genetic? So that's
it's
interesting.
Researchers love researching that one.
Yeah.
That's like a favorite hobby or a favorite topic for like people who are in the sciences. So yeah. Well, anyway, I just thought we could end it there. That I appreciate you actually talking about that, because I know it's the reality of where the world is moving now, and it's impacting genealogy as well. Is there anything else you'd like to share with folks, particularly in America, about what you do or where things are going to go, or things that they might want to know about what to find on with your society?
Well, I would just, like I've said several times already, going on about it. Just check our website and try out Haki, try out our different free databases. It only takes a few seconds if you have a name you want to check out. Join the Facebook groups. And see what, and people are very keen on helping. So
yeah, I know.
Definitely do that.
I'll vouch for that. That's absolutely true. So that's really cool. I think, people do want to help others who are doing what they're doing. So thanks. Well, Laura, I just loved having this chance to meet you in person. That was wonderful.
Thank you. It was fantastic. Very nice to meet you too.
Thank you again. Kiitos vielä kerran for spending time with us today on the Finding Finland podcast. Be sure to visit us for more conversations about all things Finland. Remember, you can find all of the podcast episodes on your favorite podcasting platform by visiting the Finding Finland webpage. See you again soon.